Hello, good evening if you're watching live, and welcome to the second of our children and young people's mental health workshops, webinars. Today is the webinar directed specifically at young people, so that's approximately 11 plus years of age, and what they can do and how they can recognise symptoms of worry and anxiety. So last week we ran a companion webinar for parents of children who may be experiencing anxiety, and that is available on our YouTube channel. If that sounds more like the thing for you, by all means go and check out the content there. We're going to be going over some of the same material, but obviously this is tailored more towards what young people can do themselves. So as the date on the screen says, last week, if you're watching this live, was Children's Mental Health Week here in the UK, and there was lots of really great material circulating, top tips on how to look after your mental well-being, and a lot of them really excellent work, so please do check those out, search them up. Today's webinar kind of fills in the gap between a list of top tips and some organised programme of work. So, if you don't know me, my name's Rob Finch and I'm the youth worker here in All Saints Church Marcham, but during the week I also work as an education mental health practitioner as one of the new trailblazing mental health support teams supporting children, young people and their families and their mental health needs in education settings. But today I'm not here in my NHS capacity, I'm just speaking as me. Like I say, children and young people's mental health has been on the it's been on the sort of media agenda a lot more, and all the better for it lately. But just talk you through some headline stats that you may be familiar with. 1 in 6 children and young people have a diagnosable mental health condition. So that's 4 or 5 in every class. Not just those experiencing difficulties, but those with a diagnosable condition. And 50% of adults who experience mental health difficulties first experience them by the age of 14. So this is why it's really important to learn skills to help manage your feelings of fear and worry when you're young. You can help prevent some of these things from taking root and causing larger issues later on. And that's what we're going to be looking at today, how to deal with these symptoms of worry and anxiety. So if you are watching the webinar live, you can comment and ask questions in the live chat function, and there's going to be a section at the end for questions and answers. If anyone's watching live, put a question in there and we'll respond to it at the end. Even if you've started watching it late, as long as you've posted the question before I finish in real time, I'll try and answer it. Don't do it if you're not watching it live, because it's not going to work quite the same way. But when the video goes into its final version on YouTube, there won't be any of the live chat remaining, and we'll answer them anonymously, so you don't need to worry about people know it's you asking the question, really. It's going to be completely anonymous. So our aims for our little webinar this evening, or whenever you happen to be watching it, to be able to recognise the physical signs of worry and anxiety, understand some of the underlying processes that are going on behind the scenes in our brain, and what we can do to respond. So our outline for the session follows this very simple pattern. After this delightful welcome and introduction, we're going to have some what we call psychoeducation. So it's finding out a bit more about those processes, then what we can do to respond to them, and a time at the end for any questions, answers, or comments. So, before we go on to that though, you may have spotted my jar next to me here, and this is hopefully going to be a useful illustration as we go forward. One of the main responses we can make to feelings of anxiety, fear and worry. When we experience fear and worry, it sometimes feels like we're a bit shaken up, and it's The worry has clouded our mind. It's all that we can think about, and it kind of dominates our thoughts and therefore our actions as well. But we're going to see what happens to this jar, which represents us and our mind, as the session progresses. In order for some of the techniques we're talking about later on to make sense, it is important that we understand some of these basic processes going on in our mind. And the first one of which is something you may have heard of, the fight, flight, and freeze response. You may have heard fight and flight response, perhaps, without freeze. That's a more recent addition. So, what this is our brain's response to what it perceives as a dangerous situation. It's the animalistic response to danger. When our brain registers the existence of our threat, our bodies enter survival mode, if you like, and prepare us to do one of three things, potentially. We're going to physically fight the threat. That's the fight. It's going to prepare us to run away or take flight. Or it's going to prepare us to shut down until the danger has passed us by. That's the freeze element of the response. So, if we're walking down the street and we hear someone shouting help, it might be our response to kick in to try and fight the situation. We're going to deal with whatever threat happens to be befalling this person in danger. If, however, we're walking down the street and we're confronted by a terrifying tiger, I, for one, am unlikely to be naturally inclined to fight it. I'm probably going to take flight and run away. I know there's a list of predators that you're supposed to run away from. Some you're supposed to stay still, some you're supposed to back away from slowly. I don't think I'm going to be able to remember that. I'm just going to be legging it as fast as possible. Take flight. Certainly, when I was younger, I was very worried about bees stinging me and stuff like that. So if I was out in the garden and a bee landed on my arm, I would just shut down. I would freeze. I would not move a muscle until that bee had flown away. And that's an example of the freeze response there. So, when this response kicks in, there's a number of physical things that happen to our bodies. And these may include some of the following. And there's a good reason why each of them happen, to facilitate that fight, flight, and freeze. The first one, increased heart rate. A lot of these are about getting oxygen to the major muscle groups to enable us to fight or run away. If our blood is pumping faster, that makes it easier. If we're breathing quicker, we're trying to take in more oxygen to facilitate those muscles going into overdrive and working. Sweating. When we're worried about something or fearful about something, we might feel ourselves sweating. Now, that is because it's our body's way of cooling ourselves down. It's expecting us to launch into action, get hot, and need cooling down. Tense muscles, as you can imagine, is a similar thing. They're getting ready for action. The butterflies and tightness in the stomach, the tightness, muscle tension kind of thing, perhaps. The butterfly thing is because the blood supply is prioritizing the major muscle groups. It is not prioritizing the digestive system. So suddenly it feels a bit weird because it's not getting its usual blood supply. And that's the reason why we get the butterfly feelings in our stomach. Need to pee. Again, blood not going to the digestive system but going to muscle groups and tension creates the urge to pee, even if we don't really need to. Being stuck for words, not being able to say something when we're fearful in a situation. That's great if we've got to hide from a predator, freeze and shut down and wait for danger to pass, but in other situations it is obviously less useful. Our vision tunnels, we focus on what's ahead of us, the perceived threat. We're not bothered about the periphery. We're dilated pupils as well to try and let in as much light as possible. There's even interesting things about not being able to recognise faces, because they're not an important function when faced with a life and death situation. Making fists, feelings of anger and rage, again, preparing us to fight a situation. Oh, excuse me. Jiggling limbs, again, our body is getting ready for action. It's expecting to move. Lightheadedness, and the last one, remembering dangerous situations. Now, there's a theory that we do that when we're fearful about a situation. We recall past similar situations which didn't go right because we're scanning our memories for ways out of the situation, perhaps. But certainly, it's when faced with a dangerous situation, we might be reminded of similar dangerous or fearful situations that we've faced in the past. The problem is that our brains haven't quite caught up to the nuances of human society just yet. It still acts as if everything is a life and death situation. Some of these situations, which might cause us to feel fearful or feel worried, won't just go away. We can't just run away from them like we would from a tiger, or we can't just fight them as we would to defend someone on the street, perhaps, or it's not just going to fly away like a bee, because it's part of everyday life. Maybe the thing that makes us feel fearful or worried is being around crowds of people, or going to school, or sleeping by ourselves. These things aren't just going to give up and go away. The fight, flight, freeze response is really useful if we're faced with a physically dangerous situation. If we didn't have that response, we would likely not have survived as well as we have. But when it triggers because of a non-life and death situation, it makes us feel like we're in peril, even when we're not. And that is not very helpful. Particularly, as I said, some examples there, being stuck for words. If we're worried about answering a question in class, to have the effect of being stuck for words when asked is actually less helpful than it's more negative than it is a positive effect. And this is true for a lot of things. For a lot of situations, instead of preparing us for what we need to do, we just sort of feel sweaty, tense, and vulnerable. Okay? So, that is an important element to consider, the fight, flight, and freeze response. Maybe you recognise some of those, some of those symptoms from when you're worried or fearful about things. I should say, we're going to exchange the words worry, fearful, and anxiety and anxious interchangeably. How they work is basically the same thing, it's just the situation they occur in, which we kind of change the language for. So that's the fight, flight, and freeze response. But how does that affect us for worries that keep coming back to us? Well, we're going to address that in a moment. But maybe before we go on, just as a final reflection on the fight, flight, and freeze response, think of a time when you felt in physical danger. Maybe it was because you were near the edge of a cliff, for example, or you were near an animal that you found quite scary, perhaps. What did it feel like? Can you remember any of those physical sensations from the previous slide there? Maybe you can think of a couple. Now, a time when you felt nervous about a situation, not because there was a physical danger, but because it was something that made you feel nervous. A situation where you've got to meet new people or try something different, perhaps. Did it feel in any way similar? Chances are that there is at least some similarity between some of those symptoms that you felt for the perilous situation and some that you felt in the nervous situation. But anyway, how does that affect us in an ongoing way? This is something that we call the vicious cycle of anxiety. You can see my vicious cycle sat there. And let's have a look at the vicious cycle, and we'll explain it as we go on. So we start at the top of the cycle with an uncertain situation. And this is what triggers that fight, flight, and freeze response, because we don't know what's going to happen. If a situation is uncertain and we don't know the outcome, our brain often registers it as dangerous in the only way that it knows how, the fight, flight, and freeze response. We're programmed to like certainty and certain situations. The next part on the wheel there is the belief that worry is helpful. If our body is giving us all these physical messages of you're in danger, you need to do something. It makes us feel very, very vulnerable. And we believe that we're feeling those things for a genuine reason. Why would we not? We must be in danger if we're feeling in danger, surely. So we believe that worry is helpful, and the situation we're in is dangerous because our bodies are telling us that. So that takes us to the bottom of the cycle here, what we call safety behaviours, or sometimes called worry behaviours. This is how we respond to a situation if it's an uncertain way of doing things. So some of these things, some of these safety behaviours, some of the obvious ones are to avoid the situation if at all possible. We're nervous about calling someone on the phone, so we'll send them a message instead, and therefore not have to call them on the phone. We might postpone something. I'm worried about doing this homework task wrong, therefore I'm not going to do it right now, and I'm going to do it tomorrow. Some of the less obvious ones, perhaps, are something we call reassurance seeking. So it's constantly asking if something is going to be okay, even though nothing's changed since the last time we asked. But we have to keep being told it's going to be okay, this is a safe situation, maybe from multiple different people. And the last one is over-preparing. So constantly checking and rechecking the same thing, perhaps. So if you're going away on holiday, you're so worried about forgetting something that you pack and repack your bag every day for a week before you go. That's over-preparing. The reason we do these things is because they work. In the short term, at least, the next stage is temporary relief. Because we've avoided the situation, we've postponed it, or we've got some kind of minor reassurance temporarily, we feel a little bit of relief. And that's nice. We like that. The problem is, the next time a similar uncertain situation crops up, our body's going to react in the same way, and we're more likely to respond with the same behaviour. If we've postponed something before or avoided it, we're more likely to do it again. And we get stuck in this loop, going round and round. So, where do we break the cycle? Quite simply, it's at the bottom of the cycle, with these safety behaviours. We can't change whether a situation is certain or not. We can't change how our body responds, and we can't change feelings of relief. What we can change is how we respond in a situation, and that's what we're going to look at later on in the session. Some tools to help us, rather than avoid, postpone, or have to seek reassurance, to help us cope with the situation and power through it. We're going to look at some of those. Before we do that, though, we're just going to have a quick look at some common worries. Maybe some of these sound familiar to you. So these are different anxious expectations. So quite often when we think about things we're worried about, we think about the situation in which they occur, rather than what we're worried about will happen. We say someone is afraid of the dark, or they're afraid of speaking in front of other people. But really it's a bit more than that. They're worried about talking in front of people because they're worried they will say the wrong thing, and people will think badly about them, people will judge them, people will think that they're stupid. The reason people are afraid of the dark is not because of the dark itself, perhaps, but maybe it's about not being able to tell what's happening in the room, and there might be something dangerous there. So some different kinds of anxiety and different examples of expectations that people have. Some of these might be familiar and resonate with some of you. Social anxiety, so that's being worried about how things occur in groups of people. I will get told off, people will think I'm stupid, I won't know what to say, it will be really awkward. Separation anxiety, so this is being apart from the people and places in which you feel secure. Someone will break in while I'm asleep, my parents will get ill and die when I'm not around, and something or someone will come into my room when it's dark. Generalised anxiety, which can be about all sorts of different things and manifest in very different situations. I will do badly at my schoolwork. Something bad might happen at school tomorrow. Might be a flood, and we will all get hurt or die. Specific phobias, fears about particular people, places, things. The dog will jump up and bite me. Someone will be sick at school, and I will get sick. The injection will hurt, and I will get upset. So, what can we do? Before we have a look at some of the things, it's important to remember that you do not have to do this alone. If your worry or your anxiety is having an effect on your home life, let's just say, then please reach out. Talk to a trusted adult, the school's pastoral or well-being team, your doctor or GP. If you're concerned for your safety or those around you, I should say, then please do that quite urgently. You can talk to an out-of-hours GP service. You can sort of Google those numbers. You can call 111. You can call your local CAM service, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, or Samaritans. If it's really too much and you can't see a way out and you need to talk to someone, there are helplines such as Samaritans available. But in the case of these kind of minor anxieties, the things that are getting in the way, but perhaps not ruling our lives just yet, the ones we want to nip in the bud, we're going to look at some possible responses to those. Now, earlier, we shook up our jar and looked at how cloudy and muddied our mind can get when we're worried. But we can see it's had a little bit of time to settle. And actually, things are looking a lot clearer now. Just because there's been a little bit of calm, things have settled back down. And some of these techniques, we're trying to do the same thing with our mind. We talked about that fight, flight, and freeze response. There are certain things that we can do to help minimise the effect of that on our bodies. If we minimise the effect of the fight, flight, freeze response, we minimise the signals our body tells us about being in danger. It helps our ability to cope with a situation. And additionally, some of these strategies, what they do is they take our focus off that worrying thought and onto a different task, allowing us just to gain that moment of calm, for things to settle down and to make it easier for us to cope. So we're going to talk through a few simple exercises in a moment. But as another illustration of that, there was a Russian author called Dostoevsky, and he wrote this thing about a polar bear. He said, "But I haven't got a polar bear, so I'm going to use a panda bear." Okay, so he said, if someone tells you not to think about a panda bear, all you're able to do is think about that panda bear, okay? So if I asked you now not to think about this panda that I'm holding, stop thinking about this panda. Under no circumstances think about this panda. I mean, it's right there in front of you. You can't help but think about it. And the same is true of our worries. Some people might tell us, oh, you don't need to worry about that. Oh, don't worry. But we are worrying. And we're thinking about it. We can't just stop thinking about it because it's there, okay? But if I was to say to you, look, don't think about this panda bear, okay? This panda bear here, don't think about it. Don't think about this panda bear. And then there was some other distraction. At some point during that, you were not focused on the panda bear. You were looking at me very convincingly getting attacked by a convincing crow. And that is what some of these techniques are. They're just something to take our mind off the worry and allow us that moment to refocus on something else. So the first exercise we're going to talk about is a regulated breathing exercise. So this not only gives us something to focus on, but it also is going to slow our breathing down. Remember that quickness of breathing was one of the things which makes us feel in danger. So we can take control of that. And there's lots of different regulated breathing exercises you can do. I've heard of loads. There's balloon breathing, where you sort of like this, you go. You might have heard about something called box breathing, where you either physically or mentally trace the sides of a square, sometimes square breathing, and it's in, hold, breathe out, hold. Now I struggle with that one because I forget which side is which and I get in a terrible mess. So one variation on square breathing or box breathing is this hand breathing. I'll hold it so it matches the picture on the other side. Now it's probably very weird to see a picture of a hand with 4 on rather than 5. There's a reason for that. Okay, with box breathing, there's a whole bunch of different variations about how long you breathe in for or hold it for. What we're going to do is we're going to do some breathing where we breathe in and we hold it, each for a count of 4. So it's really simple. So we just do a count of 4, okay? And then we're not trying to breathe really deeply as if we're warming up for sport. Because if we're warming up for sport, we're trying to oxygenate our muscles and get that blood round. We're just trying to take control of our breathing. So we want slow, regular breathing. We're not looking to do really deep breathing. So what you do is you take a finger and you trace around your hand, okay? So when you're going up the side of a digit, you're breathing in, and we're going to take 4 seconds to do that. So you go. And then hold it for 4 on the top. And then as you go down, we're going to breathe out. Again, for a count of 4, slowly. Temptation is to go in the first second, but we're slowly breathing out and holding it for 4 at the bottom. And we repeat for each digit. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, and we go all the way around the fingers, and then maybe actually all the way back round. And by the time we've gone all the way down the hand and back, we've actually taken control over the pace of our breathing and actually can't manage to successfully calm ourselves down. So that's a really good and very easily used technique. And you might particularly feel anxiety in situations where you're waiting for things. You're waiting for something to happen, perhaps. So it's really good because you don't need any equipment or anything like that. If you're at home and you're feeling worried, by all means, just do an activity that you like to take your mind off it. But if we're out and about, we don't always have access to our favourite activities, which is why some of these things are really useful. So the regulated hand breathing, using counts of 4. Another one that you might consider, again, thinking about using your hand as a guide, is looking at your different senses. So what we do is we look at our 5 senses and we're just mindful of the space that we're in. So it's got a lot of tie-in with mindfulness kind of activities. So the first thing we do is identify 5 things that we can see in the space that we're in. So I can see the camera that's recording me. I can see the light fittings. I can see the church organ here. I can see my jar. I can see my phone is out, so I can look at the YouTube comments that are coming in. And number 5, what can I see? I can see my laptop that's got the PowerPoint display on it. After that, we go for 4. And we're going to look for 4 things that we can touch. And 4 things that we can touch, but we kind of have to identify how they would feel. So we might not be able to physically grab them from where we are, but we know what they'd feel like. So there's some carpet here, which I know is going to be kind of slightly fluffy. The organ pipes, they're going to be quite cold at the moment because we're filming this in a sort of very cold night in February. We have got the table surface in front of me. It's probably going to be very smooth. And I can see some flower display at the back of church, which is probably going to be very, very soft and delicate. 3 things that we can hear. I can hear some traffic on the road. I can hear some of the electronic hum from the equipment around me, and I can hear the electric lights buzzing away. 2 things that we can smell. Or at least 2 things in the room that you know smell a certain way. So I've got some, I can still smell the hand gel that's on my hand from sanitising my hands on the way in. And once again, I can see the flower display at the back of church, which I'm sure smells lovely and floral. And the last one, what can we taste? It might be there's still a taste in your mouth. You might have eaten something or drunk something or got that kind of dry mouth kind of taste. But if there is nothing, you can just think of something that you'd like to be able to taste. And I am thinking of a nice hot cup of tea right now. That is what I would like to be tasting. So none of that is difficult, but it occupies a little bit of your thoughts. You can do it with all sorts of things. You can name 5 things in a particular category. So, all 5 things that are red, and you quickly rattle off fire engine, post box, telephone box, and then your mind goes blank, and you have to think for a while before you go, the background of the McDonald's logo, and oh, this carpet's red, actually, come to think of it. There we go. Now, there are millions of things in the world that are red, but as soon as you try to think of one, it's really hard. If you've got a particular favourite sort of book series or film series or sporting team, you can try and name particular categories of people and actors or sportsmen that fall within a particular category. It's just helping you to take your mind off the worrying thought. Okay. Those are things that you can do in the moment. These are all things to do when you're confronted with a worry and you just need to power through. Okay. Something you can use in mid-term kind of situations is what we call progressive muscle relaxation. So there's probably some really good videos online, and you can sort of YouTube progressive muscle relaxation. But we're going to lead you through one of these kind of exercises now. So this is really good for when, I don't know, you've got in after a day of school. We're filming this during lockdown, so imagine a time when you are going to school. Or maybe you're about to go to bed and you just need to kind of let stuff go. Okay. What we do with this exercise is really good at relieving some muscle tension, but also it gives us the physical sensation of relief. Okay. We learned earlier how the physical sensation of being tense and danger helps us feel in danger and vulnerable. The physical sensation of relief can help us feel relieved and comfortable. So this is why we do this. So what we do is we tense different muscle areas for 5 seconds at a time, and then we just relax them for 10 seconds, focusing on that feeling of relief. Okay. We'll run through these quickly. We're not going to do the whole thing, but so you kind of get the idea. Okay. And basically, we work from one extreme of the body all the way down to the other. So we might start with the right hand and the right forearm. So make a fist, tense the whole forearm for 5 seconds, and then focus on that feeling of relief. And then do the same with the left. Next, we do the upper arm. So you do a nice little which way to the beach, that way, and tense that upper arm for 5 seconds, and then relax it. Make sure you're sort of sat somewhere comfortably and loose for this one. Do the same with the other arm. And release. After the arms, we do the forehead. So raise those eyebrows as high as we can for 5. And then release for 10. The next one, we're going to tense our eyes and our cheeks up like this. And then relax. Mouth and jaw. Massive yawn, as if you're yawning. Open it up. And relax. The neck, we're just going to look up. Show it's tense. And relax. Incidentally, if you've got any kind of like injury at the time, don't try and do some of these if it's going to make it worse. So shoulders, we're going to go up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then focus on that feeling of relief. And we're going to push the shoulder blades back, chest out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then relax. We're going to do our sort of chest and stomach, and how we're going to do that is by kind of taking in air as well as tensing muscles at the same time. Okay, so you work. If something's feeling tense, you're doing it right. So. And release. The next one, sort of hips and buttocks, so it's kind of clenching those cheeks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then relax them. The upper leg, which sound like the thigh muscles, you can kind of just create a bit of tension in there quite naturally. And you do the right one for 5, then release it, and then 10, and then tense the left one, 5, and then release it for 10. The lower leg, again, you just kind of work out what you need to do with your leg to create tension in the lower leg. On the right one for 5, then release, and the left one for 5, then release. For the feet, how you kind of tense your feet the recommended method is to kind of curl your toes down and create tension that way. So do the right one. It's a bit weird if you're wearing shoes at the moment, like I am. And release it, and same with the left. So not only does that give your mind something to focus on doing, if you can't remember the exact order, it doesn't matter, you can just kind of work your way through your body naturally. But it gives us a lot of these sensations of relief. And if we do that with our body, it helps to tell our mind the same thing. So that's a kind of mid-term kind of strategy. We've got things you can do in the moment, take control of your breathing, redirect your thoughts. Progressive muscle relaxation is something you can do in the middle. But how about in the longer term? What can we do? Well, one option is to keep what we call a worry diary. So anything that does worry you, just make a note of it in your worry diary. And you can get like apps and like loads of templates online. If you want a template, just email me and I'll send one through. But when does the worry occur? The day, the time? What's the situation? What's going on? And what is the worry? Remember, we talked about earlier, what is it that you're worried is actually going to happen? If we can identify these things, it's really helpful. And how anxious are you? How fearful are you? On a scale of 0, not worried at all, in which case, why are you writing it down? But 10, the most worried you could possibly be. And the next one, hypothetical or practical. So this is one way of dividing worries up. So hypothetical or practical. Practical worries are things that we could do something about to affect whether the thing we're worried about actually happens. Whether it happens or not depends on what we do, or we could do something to prevent it. Hypothetical worries are ones that we can't do anything to change whether they happen or not. So some examples. If I was worried that the brakes on my bike wouldn't work, that's a practical worry, because I could check them before I went out. If I was worried that someone might be mean to me today at school, that's pretty much a hypothetical worry. There's nothing that I can do to change how other people act. So quite often hypothetical worries can be expressed as all these kind of what-if kind of worries. Not all what-if worries are hypothetical, but it's kind of the pattern they follow. So some other examples. I'm worried that I will forget to bring my homework to school. Is a practical worry, because there's things we can do. We can leave ourselves a note, we can make sure we put it in our bag the night before. I worry that my friends talk about me behind my back. Pretty much a hypothetical worry. We can't control what other people do. I'm worried that I will fail my exams. If we've done all the preparation that we're supposed to, then it's a hypothetical worry. If, however, we've not done any work, then it's probably more practical, and it's probably something we could do. I'm worried that it will rain while I'm out walking. Sounds like a hypothetical worry, but really, if we think about what I'm worried is going to happen, I'm probably actually worried that I'm going to get wet. So there probably is something I could do. I could take an umbrella, I could wear a coat. I'm worried that no one will come to my birthday party. As long as I've invited people, and I've maybe checked with some people, then it's probably less of a practical worry and more of a hypothetical one. So it's learning how these categories work, which can be really important. And if we commit to writing these things down in our worry diary, it can make our attempt to redirect our attention a little bit easier, because we know we're going to come back to it. Okay, so there's probably loads of things in life where if you take some time out from it and you come back to it, then it seems a lot clearer and a lot easier. I can get very frustrated with jigsaws if we're all bits of the same colour and the pieces that go together that aren't supposed to go together, and then they can't really get them apart. But if you go away and calm down and come back to it, it all seems a bit more achievable and a bit more doable. And the same can be true of our worries as well. So, as well as writing them down in our worry diary, we can do something called worry time. So we set ourselves a particular time of day. And this is going to be different for different people depending on what's convenient for them. It might be, say, just after a meal time or just before you get ready for bed. What we do is we look back at the worries in our worry diary and ask ourselves questions perhaps like these. Again, you can probably find other lists of questions online that might suit you better. But how do you feel compared from when you wrote the worry down to now? Because this is later on. It might be that you felt 8 out of 10 anxious at the time and now probably only 4 out of 10. Or it might be a bit more descriptive. You might not like using numbers. That's fine, whatever works for you. Did the thing you were worried about actually happen? Maybe it did. Some of the things we're worried about happening do happen. If so, how did you cope? What did you do in that situation? Is there another thing that you could have done? Maybe think back to some of those redirection and calming strategies that we looked at earlier. Are any of the worries no longer a problem? If we can learn that the things that we worry about can go away on their own, this is very useful. And unless we do worry time, we don't pick up on this. What could you have been doing instead of worrying? If you spent a long time worrying, think about what else you could have spent your time doing. Is there something you enjoy doing that you could have done instead? And that might help when the situation comes back round again. So those are questions we ask about the individual worries. When we're looking at all of the worries we've written down, we might ask ourselves, are there a lot of worries about the same thing? We might recognise those kind of patterns. Are your worries more practical or hypothetical? If they're more practical, you might want to think about looking up some problem-solving techniques and things to do around that. As you can see, by the way, our jar that was a real mess earlier, a real clouded mess, having had some time to be still and calm down, things look a lot clearer. And that's the whole principle behind worry time and the worry diary. That was obviously a quick skirt through some of the possible techniques you might use and some of the underlying processes. If you want some more information, I could give you a really long list of websites to look at, but I'm going to keep it nice and simple and say Young Minds is a really great website. If you want to understand a bit more about the things that you're feeling, then this is a great resource and set of resources to check out. If you feel like your worries are getting bigger and they're interfering with you doing the things that you want to do, then there's loads of people you could talk to. Talk to a trusted adult, talk to your doctor, talk to the school's pastoral or welfare team, just for example. So let's have a look at the aims for tonight that we set out to do, to recognise the physical signs of worry and anxiety, to understand some of the underlying processes that go on behind, and how to respond. So the physical signs, we listed a whole raft of them that can happen because of the fight, flight and freeze response. And together with the vicious cycle of anxiety, that's some of the underlying processes that are going on. How to respond. We've got some of the things that we can do in the moment to take control of some of those physical symptoms, to redirect our attention and to calm down and to still our jar. We talked about some sort of like mid-term kind of exercises, like the progressive muscle relaxation that we can do at particular times of day to help us feel more relieved, and some ongoing strategies, such as the worry diary and worry time. So that takes us on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. There's actually no questions that have come in on the chat, but my youth email address is up on the screen there. Do feel free to, if you've got any particular questions, send them through. If you'd like a sort of worksheet copy of any of the tools that we've talked about, then I'll happily send those through to you. Equally, if you've enjoyed these sessions and you think it'd be really good to do ones around another sort of children and young people's mental health topic, then let me know what that would be, and we can see about putting some on in the future. Until then, it's goodbye from us, and it's a difficult time at the moment if you're watching live, between lockdown, home learning, and a lot of the end dates for that are yet unknown. It's situations that can cause us to worry. So think about how you can take control of some of those situations to prevent it from stopping you getting on with the things that you want to be doing.